earlier this afternoon, or I say we, Janine and Evelyn talked earlier this afternoon about the future of the workplace, and a lot of that was culture. When that hybrid workplace, remote workplace aspect comes in, that reality, that's something that's interesting, how that affect people's willingness and movement patterns.
Big time. Plus the fact that it's hard to get good people. There's just more leverage now for people. I'd love to do it, but I don't want to move, and I can do the job well. And the argument's always been there, but I think it's got more legs now.
Yeah. I've for a long time, well, over years now, I thought that the pandemic has basically given, especially I think small firms, a competitive advantage, because now you could be, and I'm not trying to knock any city or any location, but you could be a great design firm in Kansas City that doesn't have quote unquote great design talent or an overabundance of great design talent. So you could grab somebody from New York or LA, sort of stereotypical centers, and be super competitive from Kansas City with people from other places.
You can also be a good designer and live anywhere and work anywhere.
Yeah, the other side of that, yeah. Okay, they're saying audio started. Okay, good.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well, it's too bad we only have 14 minutes left.
That's all right. That's all right. We'll catch them up.
Just talk fast.
We'll talk double speed. When you were talking earlier about the professional side and what professionals could do, it really reminded me that I love to challenge architects and say, you have one job, and that one job is not to create the built thing. It's not to create the jewel box or whatever it is that you're aspiring to design. It's to make your client's life better.
Yeah.
And and that can mean a lot of things, which I was sitting there thinking that as you were presenting, it's like, yeah, you're opening a lot of cans of worms here. But I think that's really in line with that, is as professionals, how do we make people's lives better?
Well, I'm trying to push people on this, because I think the glass half empty view of architects would be they just jump right in to the diagrams, they draw a picture, right? And they're thinking about what they want and not necessarily what's going to work for them. That's the glass half empty view. But I think you're at the table to have this abundant view, where you can ask these open-ended questions that are broader initially, and you begin to see a picture emerge. And then you're able to see how your work, to your point, fits in to make your client's life better. And to take it a step further, with people living longer now, the question isn't just how do I make my life's client better today? In what way are these ideas and changes make what I'm doing better the next year, 5 years from now? One of the things that makes me so sad, and I mentioned this in my talk, is when I picked on apartment buildings, but when some apartments are developed and they're not thinking about the full range of people that may move in and want to call it home. And then it's because it doesn't have that sense of community, or because there's all these fall risks, say in the bathroom, that requires someone to have a move earlier than they could have been. So I think there's here and now meeting your client's needs, but there's also pushing your client a bit to think down the road, and then using your skills to help design that solution.
Yeah. Jessica's comment is, I think, really right on the button here, right along the lines of what you were talking about. Jessica, you want to?
I'll read it for you, Jessica.
You want me to put you on the spot?
Our upcoming 2023 code update in California has some requirements geared toward aging in place, blocking in walls for grab bars, for example.
I know
Jessica.
Yeah, listen, I know there's some things in California. There's an argument that says, particularly people that live in Texas might say that the requirements can be overboard, in California. That said, I love that change. To add blocking when you're building a building is so much less expensive than going back in and retrofitting. And in a case where you're working with a family client, to translate it in their language, what if I'm an owner of a multifamily building, I'm thinking, Occupancy, and a related point would be length of stay. That allows me some level of just pricing power over time. So if I'm able to cater to a broader audience, which is what blocking does provide, it allows effectively a larger market of people I can address to. And I didn't get into the pictures earlier, but there's, oftentimes our image of what a grab bar looks like can look different, right? There's ways you can make this more attractive. But also it means that people that are already living in the apartment building, they can just stay there longer. So I applaud California's decision in that respect. That should be happening more places. Or even if it's not a requirement, more developers should just be doing it. The costs are so minimal on the front end, and architects can help encourage these developers to do that because the costs are so minimal relative to the reward.
A reminder to anybody in the room, if you'd like to, you're welcome, and encouraged to type your comments is fantastic because that keeps everything scrolling here. But if you would like to grab the mic, Mark has the mic. That's kind of weird. Mark has the mic. So you can ask a question, make a comment with the mic as well that Mark has.
Mike could have a mark,
Like
and
there's
Mark
a
could
question
have a
there
mic.
in the middle.
Oh, weird.
Question back there. Also, I had a thought that just went out of my head. A question for everybody in the room: is anybody focused on aging in place in your practice?
Focused, you mean, or just think about it while we're?
Well, I know that some have. That's a particular focus.
All right, here's my question, and I typed it in, but it got lost in the audio conversation.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about trends that you're seeing in real estate development around longevity housing, living in or aging in place housing? Is there new thinking around site selection, around amenities, things like that we should be thinking about as we're counseling our clients?
Yeah, great question. And I saw that earlier and I couldn't figure out how to scroll down. So thank you for bringing that up. So great question. I go into some detail in the book on this. And in fact, I have a early chapter dedicated to railing on the term aging in place. And so I'll go into that for just a moment. And keep in mind, about 90% of people say they want to age in place. And what that generally means, I want to stay in my home really for as long as physically possible, hopefully forever. And the reason I rail against that term, couplefold. One's the term itself, like it makes it seem like we don't really have much control on our, it's like aging's happening to us. We're not proactive in our journey. And the second piece too is it's like we're stuck. We're stuck like a statue. And when you look at the research around successful aging, it's the exact opposite. It's about being active. It's about leaning in. It's not about retiring from, but retiring to. What's that next chapter? So I think aging in place is a useful crutch that people, I'm just going to age in place. When in large part, they're not really thinking through the implications of that. So from a strategy, so I suggest in the book calling it living in community, or perhaps a term that's a little bit easier to digest is just aging in the right place. And as a strategy, as individuals, that's one of the reasons why I think things like the assessment are helpful, because it helps people think, well, wait a second, I might love my address, might like to be emotionally connected to my physical dwelling, but I don't know any of my neighbors. Half of older adults don't know any of their neighbors, for example. And so your physical address has not changed, but effectively your life around it has changed dramatically. And so if you can then just to get it, kind of assess, is this really the right place? It opens up other ways of thinking. What are those ways of thinking? Well, there's a lot of, I would say, new products that are coming and on the way. And some of it was happening before the pandemic, and it's then, I think, gotten a bit accelerated now at this stage. And one of them, for example, I would say is the kind of cottage or even ADU movement, where you're seeing situations where people, if they opt not to age in place, and by the way, just to say one other kind of nail in the aging in place coffin for a moment, is that in many cases, people are just super socially isolated. I mean, sad situations where you walk in and levels of a house are not being used ever. And they're all on the first floor and they're not, and they had too much stuff and that gets in the way. And anyway, so this idea of moving though from often a single family house to an apartment can be abrupt for a lot of people, particularly if they haven't been in apartment living, previously, or even in congregate living. And so it's been happening for a while, but I do see increasing popularity of just a cottage among other cottages. Maybe it's a pocket neighborhood. You're seeing build for rent being, real popular product type today, where really came out of the Great Recession. But what if we built homes that are purposely, to rent? And I know one developer here in Texas, a larger one, half their residential build-to-rent properties are being rented by people 55 and older. It's not age restricted, but that's what people are opting for the lifestyle. They're recognizing that there's a lot of hassles of home ownership they don't have to deal with, that locked in for the long term. There's pros and cons, but that's part of it. Another piece of this related to it is traditional senior living communities, where they're adding more cottages to their campuses. So again, there's the idea, well, I have now a plan for care, what I might need, but I have my own place, I have my own four walls, but still amidst the community. And then you're seeing the accessible dwelling unit, ADU movement too, where, in fact, my parents, they're in their middle-aged 70s, they're going through this right now in California. They're sorting out that, and the regulation's helping them at the moment, is that they're saying, well, what if we built an ADU that we could design in such a way that it would work for both of us, either of us. We could rent it out. We could have family. I have a younger sister who lives in Australia. When they move out, they visit, they can be there. So the broad theme is cottages or smaller single family of different business models, but also incorporating those universal design elements I talked about earlier. And then being mindful, I think also technology is going to have a key role. And I think there's more people thinking about, with the technology advancements, the way healthcare now, I talk about this in the book a bit, where healthcare can now come to you. You don't have to go in every stage. It's getting much more sophisticated, more and more sophisticated over time. It means that we don't have to move into institutional settings at the same time frame or pace historically. And so I think that's exciting. I think, I know there's one research piece I saw, a skilled nursing group found that people are more fearful of skilled nursing than death itself. So, and that was something done before the pandemic. And given all the stories that we heard, I suspect it's probably even more true now. So there's a lot of stuff happening. I would say particularly this kind of cottage-ish thing is one of note. And then the degrees of freedom that now technology and healthcare delivery is part of it as well. One last caveat on this we need to be mindful of is, which again goes back to place, but more, I would say the regional or metropolitan level is just access to people. And so if your plan is to have more of a home for life that you've designed, Todd, think about our conversation earlier, what's your access to people if you need care or maintenance even on your property down the road? What does that look like? And I think certain markets, my consulting practice, I've worked with some groups and working with groups in the Northeast. New Hampshire, for example, it's a really tough labor market now. It's projected to get worse over time. So if your plan is to stay in your single family house or build a cottage, really think through what the fail points might be over time, because that may not be as feasible as you hoped it would be.
What kind of age are you talking about? I mean, I know that your book, the audience was supposed to be people in their midlife.
Yeah.
Is that 45 or is that 55? Or
well, so yeah, great question. So I found it to be really people in their 50s plus. If I were to, hit a number, this idea that you're either soon to be an empty nester, empty nester, pre-retiree, retiree, that's really, Katharine, where the bulk of it is. But as I said, people in their 30s and 40s who've read it, I think in part because, to your point earlier, place matters, particularly the long-term planners. They might be thinking, well, is there a place I'd want to go to that I'd really want to dig roots in? There's one concept that I've written about and done some videos on, but actually didn't make the book because I didn't think about it at the time, which was this idea, are you a somewhere or anywhere person?
yeah.
And I have a close friend that they're in their 70s, but they are in Tyler, Texas. And their actual dwelling may change, but they are not leaving Tyler, Texas. They are so webbed into the community. It's so a core piece of their identity. Those are somewhere people. They're not going to be flipping through best places to retire. Like, it's Tyler. And and for them, it makes a ton of sense. And then there's anywhere people where they don't have that same rootedness, and they're open to what is the next kind of place I can go to. And then there may be a blend where you have somewhere where you have anywhere people looking for their somewhere, where they know where they are now is not right, but they want to go to a place where they can dig roots and that. So there's a number of like psychological pieces to this too.
Sometimes you have an anywhere person married to a somewhere person, and then that's kind of an issue.
Yeah. I'm in one of those.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, that's actually an excellent point, because this is great, like in theory, but when you then really go through the hard decision making, and you got two people there and you're making decisions together, those preferences matter a lot, and talk a bit about in the book as well. What are the conversations that need to be had along the way?
No, I had another question for you about what you said about changing the order of the typical, or I don't know what you call it, expected life, of going to college, getting married, having kids. And you said it would be rearranged. So how are you thinking that could be rearranged?
Yeah, so this is, for those that are interested in this, and I think this really pertains to all of us here in the room, definitely for our next generation too. And so Laura Carstensen at Stanford, she's been talking about this for a while, but they released a report, I want to say 6 months ago, called, I think, The New Map of Life. And they have a class. I went to Stanford Business School, and this class wasn't there at the time, but they offer it now, where they have a partnership with the Longevity Center, where I think also some undergraduate students, and they say, if you knew you were going to live to 100, what chapters of life, what would they look like now? And one of the things that can happen sometimes is that you have these periods of like intense situations where, you are the child rearing stages, or the caregiving with older family members, certain like peaks where you wish, could I just maybe take some of that load off? And so I think, Katharine, what she talks a bit about is, could you find ways where you're like, I'm going to pause my job for a little bit and then pick it back up when right now we have 3 teenagers all in high school. It's pretty crazy. Like, in less than 4 years, my wife and I are going to be looking at each other and be like, what just happened? We'll have a lot more time.
Well,
and
for a couple years until they come back.
Thank you.
Live in your garden shed.
So I think, I think part of it is just recognizing, like, there absolutely is an opportunity to like throw this, I grow up, I go to college, I have kids, I get married, I retire, like that thing, that narrative, almost throw that away. The challenge at the moment is a lot of companies haven't adapted to that. But I think with hybrid working, some of the leverage now talented people have, I see some of that changing.
I think that's an interesting question. If you're an architect, maybe it applies beyond residential design, but that's immediately what pops into my head. That'd be an interesting question as you're starting to work with your clients. If you knew that you were going to live to 100 years old, how would that affect this design process? How would it affect this project that you want us to design with you? Maybe somebody incorporates that into their client experience.
So I think that's a great point. And I think you asked a question earlier, who's in the aging in place kind of focus? I think there's at least one gentleman that raised his hand.
Yeah, Alan did.
I would argue that you're all in that business. And the reason why you're on that business is because the question you just asked, like, hey, decent chance, you're going to be living to 100. Like, how do you think about that?
I don't think that's so great.
It depends on the individual, but you'd be surprised. But part of it is like being thoughtful designing. Even like the front porch example I had. Are there things you can do to make it easier to have spontaneous, social connection with others? Like those things, they really can make a difference.
Metaverse could help with that, but that's a different conversation.
I'm not sure about metaverse.
Well, a word that keeps coming up, an idea that keeps coming up is is connection, connectedness. And I think, all week, so what we do with context and clarity is we say, okay, this is who we're going to talk to on Thursday. This week it's Ryan.
Yeah.
Talks about power of place. And then we shape our entire week of conversations around that theme, that we're going to talk about. And so we've been Monday and Tuesday, we talked about physical place. Yesterday, we talked about figurative place and quality of life. And then I don't even remember what tomorrow's topic is now off the top of my head. But I think it's how we can affect, or how we might want to change our place as we look at our quality of life.
Well, I just moved, and I think people should move every 3 years, get rid of all their stuff, because
hard.
if you're in one place for 15 years, just forget it.
Well, if that's the case, I'm going to open a dumpster service.
You're going to have to open a dumpster service.
It's hard. It takes courage.
I should have read your book, though. I just moved to this old house with a stairway that steep, so that might not have, or maybe that's the best idea. I don't know.
Could be.
Worst or best
be.
idea. I won't live to 100. Maybe I'll fall down the stairs.
We've turned morbid here. Context and clarity.
Sorry, everyone.
Speaking of going dark. And I also realize that we're at the top of the hour, so we need to wrap this up. But before we wrap it up, any questions from our live audience, or live on, also on screen? Strangely meta here. Mark's running, so there's a hand up. Jefferson.
It's a simple question. If aging in place is not what we're supposed to say, what are the words that you use?
Great question, and I think it's a struggle right now. It's easy to criticize one, but not necessarily come with a great one. Like in the book, I push people around living in community because it's more proactive, and it shows it's a team sport. It's so critical here.
What did you say it was?
Living in community term, but I think there's some challenges of that being a broadly adopted term. That's why I think a compromise might be aging in the right place, because it's a simple modification to an already adopted term. And what that allows people to say, it probes them to say, well, am I really in the right place? And if we can also, as I described, think about it more broadly than just physical design, it allows people to say, I love my home. There may be no stairs, a bunch of efficiency, but I might be just really lonely where I am right now. And that in and of itself, or I don't have purpose the way I need to, and I need to be around others. So I think aging in the right place is probably, practically speaking, the best next incremental step towards getting people to think differently, but still be in that kind of broad universe.
It's kind of like,
Could be living in the right place. And actually, thank you. To that point too, some of these things are, as I mentioned, the book was focused on the second half of life because that's been a lot of my background the last 15 or so years. But a lot of these themes they're age independent. So living in the right place, that should matter to you no matter what, age or stage you're in.
There we go. One more question.
Well, I was working on an assisted living facility several years ago, and the director pointed out that one thing they were trying to grapple with was that as longevity increases and people end up living to 120 or 130 on average, then their 110-year-old kids or 90-year-old grandchildren are going to be trying to take care of them. And so they're trying to think ahead about, what are we going to do when that happens?
Well, they're definitely thinking in the future. Back to my point around longevity or lifespan, health span, and wealth span. There's some people, particularly in Silicon Valley, that feel pretty strongly that there's going to be different advances that are going to allow people to live longer without compromising their health span, so that it'll become more normal. Again, I'm not in that camp. I haven't studied it the way some of these guys have done it, but there are some that believe the next 10 years, someone who's 50, so 10 years they'll be 60, their health status will be pretty much like they're 50. Like it's like they've kind of gotten older chronologically, but their health age has stayed the same. And so that's one of the biases that was a society we have to deal with, which is we make this assumption typically that age means like loss of like physical ability. And that idea, I think it needs to be challenged, because you'll see more and more feats of people in their 90s doing amazing things that you never would associate with someone in their 90s. And there's something called the U-shaped happiness curve. You can find it on my blog on the website. It basically talks about, it's a global phenomenon that you have a certain happiness level in like your 20s, and then it goes down pretty precipitously till your late 40s, early 50s. I like to think it's something to do with having teenagers in the
My
house.
kids leave.
And then it climbs up. So in your 70s and 80s, your self-reported well-being happiness is higher than it's ever been. So in taking that into account, there's also research that says that if we think tomorrow, we're going to be lesser tomorrow than we are today, it impacts our health today. So as we think about this aging thing, I'm not trying to make it too Pollyanna, but it is this element where we do have a fair amount of control actually, and the stereotypes that we give, we need to erase some of this stuff. And so you could have people living to 130 and also people that are 100, their kids that are actually in much better physical condition than we would think of.
That's amazing. That's a lot to think about right there. Interesting image. Where's the best place? Where do you want people to connect with you?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I've got a presence on Facebook and Instagram as well. But LinkedIn's probably great. And feel free to send me an email as well. It's just Ryan, RYAN @smartliving360.com. As I said, the brand's going to change here shortly to Here, and the website's going to be here.life. Would strongly encourage you, though, to take that assessment, and see how it can be beneficial for your knee, see how it might be helpful for, clients that you work with. If you have ideas to make it better, please let me know. What's happened here, as I mentioned earlier, I feel there's a movement. Place is on the mind of a lot of people, and we can create better places, which is what your jobs are professionally, but also we can choose better places for us in the different stages. And what might be right for Katharine, maybe not right for me. That's part of it, and vice versa. It's like we have our journey helping people have the tools to make the right decisions for themselves. I'm starting in January, I'm going to be creating some workshops to help people go through this, initially in person, so they can then create their own, what I'm describing, right place plan. For some people, they can go dive in a book and do it, and it's awesome. For most people, that's not the case. It's particularly if the couple's involved. It's like, wow, this raised a bunch of issues. How do we then get it to like a shared vision? And so that's the next step in this. And that could also be valuable, for some of your clients. It'll be an online version over time, but want to start off, in person initially. I think if people have, it's common for us to have a financial plan for a longer life. I believe all of us should have a place plan as well, recognizing that we change and so do our places. And so having to revisit that, I think, can be really important in terms of solving for the benefits of this long life.
Yeah. All right, there you have it. Connect with Ryan Frederick on LinkedIn or Ryan at smartliving360.com. It's the best way to reach him and participate, right? Engage. You have the ability to perhaps change the direction here or influence the direction here. So Ryan, thank you very much, not only for your keynote, but for this conversation. Thank you for supporting us here and sharing all of this.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. And I just, go back to the comments earlier. Congratulations on a 10th year union, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah.
And I feel the energy, I feel the passion, and just the community that's been built as I said, it's an entrepreneurial community, clearly.
Yeah.
People are passionate about what they can do in their spheres of influence. And so I would feel grateful to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. To our speakers who are still in the room, our sponsors who are still in the room, thank you. Thank you for making this event what it was. I haven't filled out my assessment yet, but mine's going to say this is a pretty darn awesome event. Thank you for that. To all of you, all of us, this community, thank you for everything that this first annual EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting was and still is for the next couple of minutes. The way that we close this out every week is by saying thank you. Without you making context and clarity a thing, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having this conversation with Ryan. We wouldn't have this community. My encouragement to all of you, and again, this is a reminder to Jeff, be well, stay safe, keep those around you safe and well, find some way to breathe, relax, find a way to rejuvenate. We do this every day. You've got to pace yourself. Thanks for going along this long journey with us. Thanks for coming all the way from wherever home is for you to Austin, Texas for a fantastic 2 days of this conference. Thank you, all of you. And I hope that we'll see you not only online again tomorrow, but also a year from now for this next annual meeting. And who knows what the next year will bring. I see Christian said he's anxiously awaiting 12/12/22. Keep your ear to the ground. There's going to be some big announcements on 12/12/22. Thank you, all of you. Please safe travels if you're wherever it is that you're headed. And I hope that we'll see each other again soon. Connect, right? This is a community. Connect with each other before you leave. Keep up with each other, support each other, take selfies with each other, whatever it takes. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you for coming, and thank you for staying. I appreciate all of you who are here